Good afternoon, dear friends. Today, I join you for the last time for this particular interdisciplinary workshop. In fact, the Interdisciplinary Study Circle, Department of English, University of Gour, Banga organized this 7-day online workshop on research preparation in interdisciplinary literary studies. And thankfully, today, I being the speaker, I don't need to introduce anyone. So without the formality, let's delve deep into the topic that I have chosen to talk about. Now, before I do that, I would like to tell you a story. It was 2004. India had gone to tour Pakistan. The arch rival Indian cricket team under Saurav Ganguly had gone there. And they were fearful about disturbances. And the SSG commandos from Pakistan, they gave security to the hotel and the stadium during that tour. And you know, on the t-shirt worn by those personnel, there were only 2 words written. The 2 words were no fear. I think you guys have been scared silly by us talking about the nuances of interdisciplinarity, talking about what you should do, or else you will be left out, forgotten, left behind, and so on and so forth. For God's sake, please do understand this. You should not fear. You should not be apprehensive. Number one, the good old literary studies is there to stay, at least for the foreseeable future. Yes, changes are on the anvil. Yes, difficult times are coming, but they have not yet come. We may prepare, but we shouldn't fuss over that. And that is why today I have chosen to talk about how to select research area and research topic. And obviously the context is interdisciplinary literary studies. Why is it important? Come on, dear friends. The title of the workshop was Research Preparation. So obviously, you have to prepare for this research. Now, what does preparation mean? Preparation means not only initiative, but also awareness. What should we be aware of? We should be aware of the immense charm and challenge that the opening up of the disciplinary borders have placed before us. Why is it so important? What is so new about it? And what should we do about it? It's not that, as Anindya Purokayastha had pointed out during the first lecture, that interdisciplinarity is something that has landed from the moon overnight. No. Interdisciplinarity was there, interdisciplinarity is there, and interdisciplinarity will be there. Having said that, however, I must tell you that there are certain changes, certain differences. First thing that we have to understand is the question of rigor, the question of method. The method is very important because even madness has to have a method. I am being reminded of Hamlet's madness as described by Polonius. Okay, let's talk about our topic, that is choosing first the research area and then the research topic. Nirupam is going to help me out by sharing the slides, the PPT. So let's think about it. The first thing that we have to understand is the narrowing focus. Why is the narrowing focus so important? Because as Professor Anisul Rahman has pointed out, first you think about whatever interests you. There may be many things that interest you, that are dear to you, that you have loved to study. But from those lists, you will have to pick out the correct one. That means you have to cross out the wrong ones. Elimination is very important here. Selection is very important here. And that's why I propose to point out the stages by which you can narrow your focus. First thing that I need to talk about is discipline. Because that is what you are told to talk about. Why? Because we are talking about interdisciplinarity. So discipline is something that we need to understand. Now, any standard dictionary will tell you discipline means the branch of knowledge that is usually taught in higher education. Philosophy, sociology, political science, economics, physics, all these are disciplines. Now here, we have to understand that the word discipline also means that there is some kind of a rigor in it. There is also the threat of punishment. So you have to follow certain rules, certain norms. There are rigors that should be followed if you have to concentrate on a particular discipline. The next word that is of interest for our discussion will be obviously field. Field of study. We all know, again, any standard dictionary will tell you that one of the possible meanings of field, that is field of study, is the branch of study or a sphere of interest or activity. So from knowledge in discipline, we come to study. So again, narrowing down. But here, only elimination, only selection, only narrowing down will not help us. There has to be another aspect of this narrowing down process. What is that? That is called overlap. Because when we talk about fields of study, say trauma studies, gender and sexuality studies, nationalism and nationality studies, peace and conflict studies, all these things are fields of study. But we all know that even though so far as the breadth of things to be studied is lessening, there is also an overlap of various territories. Because when we talk about, say, diaspora studies, we have to talk about history. We have to use the tools and insights from history, from geography, from sociology, from politics, from economics, and so on and so forth. The next word that requires some kind of attention is area, research area, and then obviously research topic, narrowing down further. Now, research area and research topic can best be understood in relation to each other. Though broader in scope, research area is also associated with research topic, because research area is that in which the research topic is subsumed, and research topic is the answer to a question, a hypothesis, or a problem that you seek to investigate. So, if my research area is diaspora studies, then my research topic may very well be talking about, say, the novels of Abdul Razzaq Gurnah or the poems of Joseph Brodsky. Okay. The next thing we have to understand is that interdisciplinarity is something that requires two very important things to be understood. Why was interdisciplinarity important? Why had it to be brought in? It had to be brought in because of two things. One is liberalism. We can do without the rigid borders or boundaries of discipline. Another was obviously utilitarianism. Why? Because we had to and we could profitably use the tools and insights from other disciplines in order to supplement our study in one particular discipline. And that is why there have been allied concepts of, say, multidisciplinarity, interdisciplinarity, indisciplinarity, and transdisciplinarity. Why is it important? And what is the difference? They seem almost the same. Multidisciplinarity. So there are multiple disciplines, and study of one discipline often overflows into another discipline. So multidisciplinarity not only respects the coeval presence of various disciplines, it also concentrates on one particular discipline, even though it brings in matter and manner from some other discipline or disciplines. Now, interdisciplinarity is an ally, and it is important for our discussion because, like multidisciplinarity, interdisciplinarity also, number one, respects the presence and operation of various disciplines, but at the same time sticks to one particular discipline for understanding a particular phenomenon that we consider to be a fit research topic. Similar in derivation, but different in operation. Indisciplinarity and transdisciplinarity are slightly different in their focus. Both these terms deny the artificial boundaries of discipline. But whereas indisciplinarity negates all kinds of discipline in order to foreground the unity of knowledge, transdisciplinarity goes beyond all disciplines, thereby refusing to prioritize one particular discipline over another. Now, this is very significant. Why? Because we are going to talk about interdisciplinary literary research. So, we have to understand very, very soon for our convenience that even though we are going to take in things from other disciplines, our basic concern is with literary studies. Now, I will take your help while going forward in this particular lecture. So let's go to the next one. And one of you will be kind enough to read out what is written over here.
Sir, may I?
Yes, please do.
Interdisciplinary literary studies, the anxiety of redundancy versus the anxiety of inconsistency.
Inconsistency. Okay. Why is it so important to understand this? We all know that today in the 21st century, first thing that we have to understand is that literary research, literary studies is often not given the kind of the amount of importance that it really deserves. And that is why we often think that we are going to become irrelevant. We all know that we are all teachers or aspirants to be teachers of English. And we all know also that Ngugi Wa Thiong'o, for one, has talked about the abolition of English departments. And that's why we often say, often think at least, that there is the anxiety of redundancy, that we are going to be redundant. But while thinking about this, while worrying about this, we are often guilty of going to the other extreme. And what is that? The anxiety of inconsistency. So if we, for the sake of it, bring in matter from heterogeneous sources, from heterogeneous disciplines, then what will happen? The methodology will suffer, the focus will go awry, and we will be left with a research gone stale. And that is why the next thing that we require to maintain is the tactical middle ground. And this is what we should all understand. What is it? We have to understand that our main focus is literary research. literary studies. But at the same time, we have to beg, borrow, or steal tools and insights from other disciplines. And this is what the emergence and proliferation of theory has, number one, taught us, and number two, forced us to take cognizance. Okay, next point. What was that? I have
The
talked about
tactical,
the tactical middle ground.
yes, allied fields and
Allied fields
associated
and
fields. There are two
associated.
components.
Yes, I know. One is interest and competence, another is interest and imposition. Yes. You see, the thing is, sometimes we try to bring in things from associated fields, even when they are not allied. Allied means they have contextual as well as conceptual contiguity, similarity. So, we can, while talking literature, take help from history, from philosophy, from sociology, from economics, if need be, but we require to possess some kind of competence for that. Only being interested will not do. But if we, without being competent enough, draw from such disciplines as nuclear physics or solid state physics without knowing what these things are all about, then what will happen? The result will be a pseudo critical catch allism, and that is what we should guard against. I have given you certain materials, and I will strongly suggest that even when you read the first material given, that is preparing for an interdisciplinary future, you should also read one of the other materials, 5 arguments against interdisciplinary research. And that is what happens when we are imposed upon by the question of grant, by the question of institutional policy, by the question of our own convenience or that of our supervisor maybe, then we often stand to lose a lot while thinking about this particular approach, that is number one, haphazard, and number two, then therefore counterproductive. Why am I saying all these things? The topic that I was talking about was how to select a research area and a research topic. Then why should I talk about interdisciplinary literary studies? Here, my dear friends, the question of awareness comes in handy in order to help us understand our path forward. Okay, next.
Yeah, from research area to research topic. The
Yes.
feasibility, quotient,
Yes.
time,
The
data.
first thing we have to understand while talking about the narrowing focus from research area to research topic is the feasibility quotient. The feasibility quotient means we often have desires. The spirit is willing, but the flesh is weak. there are limitations. And these are the limitations, the 4 limitations that I have pointed out that are very important for you to understand. One is time, because PhD, postdoc, because MPhil is going to become redundant from next year. So we are talking about PhD, for example. Even that is now becoming time bound. So obviously, time is something that you young researchers should be aware of. When I was doing my research, I had thought of working on Ezra Pound. But then one of my revered seniors had told me, cautioned me, that the textual output of Ezra Pound is so voluminous, or Aldous Huxley for that matter, that doing a research on Aldous Huxley or Ezra Pound, standing today in the 2020s, will be very difficult. Similarly, there is also the question of resource, data. Accessing data, assessing data, all these things are very problematic. Sometimes, actually I had supervised a thesis on Caril Church. The researcher worked diligently and did a good job, but there was one lacuna. What was that? Because the researcher was working from here, from India, it was impossible for the researcher to access performance details, performance history. And working on drama, because drama is a composite kind of a text, it is not only a literary text but also a performative text. So obviously performance becomes very important. And that is why access to data, access to resource becomes very important. Similarly, the question is, I was talking about competence while discussing the previous point. Now I am coming back to it again. I am talking about ability. We have our own core competences. Even though we could increase our competence, we cannot drastically change the whole thing, because we have already reached a particular age. We are at least in our mid-20s when we start thinking about research. So obviously, the job market beckons, and there are other cookies to cook as well. So along with time and data, the question of ability also is very There is another issue, the issue of funding. Just the other day, I was talking to my colleague, the unsung hero of this particular workshop, who has put in really a lot of effort, Vivek Odhikari. I was discussing with him about funding. Yes, the question of funding is not as important in literary research as it is, say, for a subject with laboratory, with lab. Funding there becomes of paramount importance. But here also, funding is important, because sometimes accessing data, say rare books, rare manuscripts, going for field trips becomes almost impossible, prohibitively costly, for any private or independent research. Without scholarship, without fellowship, without research grant. So this is something that is also important. The next point.
The new
So
education
the
policy.
next one,
Yeah, please, please.
the next point is the new education policy and the research environment now.
Yes. Here, again, another contribution from Vivek. Now, he told me to talk about the new education policy also. We all know that there are universities today in India also that have clearly specified in their PhD advertisements that the research topic should have some bearing on the developing economy of India. So obviously, our capacity or opportunity to work on anything and everything is given a rude jolt by such kind of specification. And that is where interdisciplinarity, my dear friends, may help you a lot. But saying this does not mean that those of you who have started working on a particular topic, for example, on the say the on the plays of say Paula Vogel or Terence McNally, you should not just after putting in say uh, 2 to 3 years now simply abandon that project and think about doing something new. No, but for those who are starting their research, choosing a relevant topic with some bearing on the economic condition, the social condition, or the political condition of India may help you not only in getting a more sympathetic ear from the interview board, but also in being able to pursue further research and study not only for the job market, but also for the field of publication. We all know that there is a demand for papers and monographs on particular subjects, whereas there is little demand, little stomach for some other kinds of subjects. So this is something that we must think about while pursuing our research. Okay, what was there next? Globalization and
Globalization and research.
globalization and research is something that has also changed the scenario to a large extent. Why? Because along with globalization, there has now come an incredible information revolution whereby you can do some googling on a particular topic and you may be left with 1782 such results. But they are also accessing and assessing both the relevance and reliability of that data needs to be taken into consideration. This is something we must understand if we want to do something substantial by way of research. Okay. Next, Literary
Yes, sir.
studies in the 21st century.
Yes, sir.
You know, literary studies in the 21st century, as Professor Himadri Lahiri was talking about, we have to understand there are certain similarities, continuities, and certain differences, certain divergences. Yes, the question of rigor in research is very important. Why? Because today there is plagiarism check. Today there is the possibility of looking up sources and studies by examiners, by supervisors, and last but not least, the academic readers. And this is something we have to understand while considering what to work on. So obviously, research and rigor is something that needs to be taken into consideration. Okay, next point, what was there on this
Literature
particular
studies.
literature studies? So if we think about literature studies while standing on the crossroads of interdisciplinarity, we have to understand that along with the traditional ideas of gender and sexuality, ethnicity and class, age and ideology, health issues, and socio-political dimensions. Now, there are certain other questions and concepts that any literature study cannot do without. For example, the question of narrative and the question of discourse. Today in the 21st century, if you really want to get into or get under the bones of literature studies, you will see there are two particular schools, one propagating narrative, another standing for discourse. We all know narrative could very easily mean the recounting or the account of a series of facts or events, either actual or imagined. So, narrative could mean some kind of an establishment of a relationship between that body of work. And that is why one of the narratologists of repute, Eden White, has talked about narrative as a metacode, some kind of a human universal on the basis of which transcultural messages about a shared reality may be transmitted. It is a kind of super code, a meta code. It is a kind of an universal, a human universe. So the universalizing tendency is something that is akin to and characteristic of the research effort all the time, especially in case of literary studies. We want to generalize, we want to theorize, we want to conceptualize. And that is why the question of narrative as a human universal on the basis of which messages could be transmitted. What kind of messages? Not only intraculturally, but also transcultural. And why is it so important? Because it is about a shared reality, the shared reality of living and partly living, as the chairwoman or women of Canterbury had told us in Eliot's Murder in the Castle. So after this, we have to talk about discourse. Now, what is discourse? It can be a strand of a narrative, as opposed to being the story of that narrative. We all know that in society, acts are perpetrated, ideas are thought, habits are entered into based on discourses. And that is why Michel Foucault has talked about discourse as the interplay of rules that makes possible the appearance of objects during a given period of time. In order to talk about discursive formations, my dear friends, we have to think about the historical specificities of particular periods. On the contrary, Jacques Derrida has differentiated discourse from structure by the absence in the former of the absolute signifier, the transcendental signifier, like the center. Why is it so important? This is why discourse is always provisional and open to be interrogated. Okay? Now, similarly, we have to talk about ideas and ideologies. We all know ideas are thoughts or suggestions as to the course of action of individuals or groups at a given time. Okay? But ideology is a crystallized, standardized manifestation of heterogeneous ideas into a logically coherent, even though open to be questioned, kind of a framework. You know, ideologies seem natural, true, and almost universally applicable for the members of a particular group. But at the same time, you all know that the same kind of an ideological formation also appears as preposterous, as independent, as idiosyncratic, and even false to the members of another group. You think about the rightist and the leftist ideologies. you can very easily understand the relevance of ideologies to a class on literary studies or interdisciplinary literary studies for that matter. Why is it so important? Because, ideologies can both unite people and divide them based on the support to one particular formation and opposition to another. Now, today in the 21st century, again, literary studies has been drastically changed by the advent of theory. Again, you will say, the skeptics among you say that, sir, theories were there in the days of yore as well. But today, while talking about literary studies, we have to understand that criticism means interpretation and assessment of a particular work or a body of works or a trend or a movement or a writer and so on and so on. But you will see theory, critical theory, literary theory, cultural theory, and the whole lot. At bottom refers to the philosophical conception about the purpose and method of literature. Particular books, particular authors, particular trends, or the general ones. So obviously you will see, even though John Hopkins' encyclopedia of what is that called? Criticism and theory does not actually differentiate the two and tends to use idiosyncratically what to use for another. Everything has now become theory, everything has now become criticism. And that is why such a prestigious publication could either fail to or chose not to okay, just a little break for a sip of water. We'll see that again another aspect of the literature studies is going to be more and more relevant as we go along, and that is boundaries and porosity. Since other of studies are coming clattering for entrance or at least recognition, porosity is something that is here to stay. In cultural context, it is often referred to as Banga, some kind of a border dance between various cultural domains. Here, however, interdisciplinarity can do the trick for us poor scholars of literary studies. Okay. Okay. So the next slide.
Yes, sir. The next slide is trends and terrors.
Yes. Trends and terrors. Now we all know that today there are certain in things in literary studies. Because the atmosphere is interdisciplinary. We are getting interdisciplinarity like measles. So there are points of intersection between the humanities and other branches of study that are now being given prominence. Now, long back when I was actually facing my first convocation as an MA pass out, long before in the 1990s, the person who gave the convocation lecture was Professor U.R. Rao from ISI. In those ancient days even, he had talked about statistical stylistics. He was talking about using computer, using digital technology, using information communication technology in order to, number one, facilitate, but very importantly, number two, complicate literary studies. So when we talk about digital humanities, we have to understand that it is the point of intersection between humanities and the digital sciences. But we all know that this is one of the in things, DH. We talk about Dhai, we talk about Dharti and all that. And one of the esteemed speakers of my department's online lecture series, Dr. Manirul Islam from Presidency University, was talking about post-humanity, critical post-humanities, whereas another professor from NIT Indore, he was talking, was he Dibbojyoti? Vivek?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
He was Dibbojyoti, I think. Dibbojyoti
Sir,
from
I think
NIT Indore.
Dibbojyoti.
Dibbojyoti
He
from
was
IIM
talking.
Indore, sir.
He was talking about digital humanity. Because we have uploaded those lectures on our departmental YouTube channel, you guys can listen to them. Similarly, when we talk about environmental humanities, Professor Scott Slavik was talking about environmental humanities. Again, some kind of a day of reckoning for the anthropocentric world outlook that man had so long kept intact, that is now being challenged by environmental humanities, because the world is lurching from one particular crisis to another. The bushfires, the COVID pandemic, massive drought, and so on and so forth. The question of sustenance and sustainability, the question of man's possible contradiction and even exclusion from the scheme of things, the greenhouse gases, global warming, destructive diseases, all these things have led man to think about his relationship with the world outside. A non-human world, an extra-human world. Similarly, we'll see that the art of medicine, the philosophy of medicine, and the study of humanities have been welded together by writers and critics. Why is it so important? It has got a topical importance in the case of our day during the COVID pandemic. We are being forced to talk about the point of intersection between various diseases and our responses thereto. They have now become very, very important. Similarly, when we talk about critical post-humanity also, we will see that the enormous advances in the realm of science and technology and the ramifications there have forced man to think about, number one, his place in this world, and number two, his relationship with the non-human, post-human world. So, in the final analysis, we will see that any understanding of a particular research topic from a particular research area can only be entered into after weighing the pros and cons of interest, expertise, experience, and supervision. Well, I think I must stop here and let you ask questions and comments. I will be very happy to answer all of them if I can. And those of you who can unmute themselves and ask questions will be free to do that. If you don't want to ask questions, if you feel shy, you can write the questions in the chat box. Somebody from amongst my friends over here will read out the whole thing to me. I am prepared for your questions.
Good evening, sir. This is Shurasti. My query is a bit trivial, but I'm still asking this. It takes a very long time to find out new research ideas, even a lot longer than the research itself. Sometimes we ignore the quest for literature and concentrate on the idea. But after a while, we discover that idea of mine are very old. So is there any fast way to figure out if my research idea is new or not? Thank you, sir.
No, obviously, today internet is a big asset. There is Shodh Ganga, there is Shodh Gangotri. Nationally speaking, there are other channels, other websites, other organizations. Some of the universities in the West at least give the synopsis of their unpublished research works. So from those things, and if you keep up with the Joneses, if you actually do some Googling regularly, if you actually search the various archives, the various content providers like JSTOR, Project Muse, Taylor and Francis, and say you were talking about a particular research idea. That research idea should be associated with a particular research topic, and that too at a further remove is associated with a research area. So obviously you will see that based on a particular research area, there are other groups on Facebook, on Blogspot, and elsewhere in social media. You will see that there are so many pages, so many websites, so many journals. So at least if you cannot read all those contents, you can at least have some idea of what research is all about and how to guard against the quote-unquote redundancy and retirement of the particular way of looking at your research.
Yes, thank you, sir, and thank you for giving this opportunity. And we are very fortunate to have you. Thank you, sir.
Okay, any other question, please?
Hello, sir.
Yes.
Sir, I just had a question. For example, for literary studies these days, for any research in literary studies, as all of you said, that theory and criticism becomes one of the most important aspects of choosing a methodology. Now, just asking, what if somebody is trying to do a MPhil research and does not really have any particular theoretical angle in mind? If he or she just wants to have a very a conservative style of looking into the textual works of somebody, is it at all acceptable in today's world?
My dear lady, the problem is today in 2020, you cannot do conservative research. Why? Because at every stage you will have to justify, will have to rationalize. And the problem is, while you talk about somebody, a hypothetical researcher having no penchant for a particular theory, you have to understand theories are not bugbears. Theories are associated with all aspects of life and literature. So obviously, you think about any particular, I am asking a counter question. You give me a particular sample idea, a sample research idea. You say that you want to, or anybody wants to do a kind of a conservative research. And he or she may not, they may not have a particular idea about a particular theory or a particular theoretical predilection. So you just give me a sample idea, a sample topic.
Sir, for example, if I'm just working on the progressive writers movement and I'm looking into a socio-cultural angle without bringing any other isms into it.
Okay, okay. Socio-cultural angle. Socio-cultural angle and progressive writers movement. Progressive writers movement is associated with the leftist intellectual movement. Yes or no?
Yes, yes.
Okay. So Marxism, whether you like it or not, Marxist criticism and Marxism, they will follow you. Number one, Can you do without it? You can't. If you don't do it consciously, you will at least willy-nilly, you will do it unconsciously. Okay.
Okay.
And you say about another thing, socio-cultural aspect. So cultural studies,
Mm.
and you know, sociological criticism has now become one of the most important branches of this. And I will strongly recommend that you, for example, read Introducing Literary Criticism at the 21st Century by Julian Woolfe.
Okay.
This book is very easily available online also.
Okay. Okay, sir.
And you will understand how theories are there because words, terms, and concepts have accumulated over the years an enormous intellectual baggage. So you cannot just use them very quote unquote innocently or naively. There are ramifications, and you will have to consider them.
Okay. Thank you so much, sir.
Pleasure is mine. Next question. Feel free.
Sir, I am Sirif Das. Sir, my query is, if I want to do my research on cultural studies, how can I narrow down my research topic for my research?
Now, nobody can give you a nostrum or a nuska. I can't prescribe. First of all, you will have to understand cultural studies is the broad area based on your exposure to and interest in a particular aspect of that cultural studies field. You will have to narrow down your research first from research area to research topic.
If you can elaborate this, please, with example.
With an example. Okay. For example, say you are talking about migrant laborers.
Yes.
Migrant laborers and their oral narratives.
Okay.
Okay.
Okay, sir.
So if you are interested in that, first of all, your study and your life experience will ultimately guide you towards your research interest. Your studies
Okay,
and your life experience. Now that life experience can be first hand, can be second hand. How? For example, I was, say, 12 to 13 years back. I was traveling with a social activist, an NGO person from Malda. That person was talking about women's trafficking in certain pockets of Malda, from certain pockets of Malda. And he actually told me, Amit, you go to the Malda railway station in the evening at say 7 p.m. when this train towards Delhi. What is that train? It's always very crowded. Farakka Express or something of that sort. When it leaves for Delhi, every day you will see that number one, literally hundreds of people going to the metropolis in search of work. And you will see that there are quite a number of young women, newly married or still unmarried, who are also going there. Sometimes escorted by a male, sometimes
Yes.
totally unattended. And he told me a very peculiar story about this women's strike. If I get time, because it will take some time, I am not going to elaborate on this. I may talk to you later.
Okay, okay, sir. Thank you, sir.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay, any other question?
Yes, sir. Mariam Khatun is asking, sir, you have talked about the feasibility questions. My question is, how can the researchers be unaffected while choosing a research topic? Question mark. I mean, will the free thinking of the researchers not be hampered?
Now, one thing is there, free thinking does not mean irresponsible thinking. In life, as well as in studies, and also in research, free thinking does not mean haphazard thinking or irresponsible thinking. Because research means creation of new knowledge. It means either telling what has not been said, investigating what has not been investigated, or reassessing what has been said or done before. So obviously, you will see that any kind of research proposal, any kind of research idea will have to be thought about and judged by the researcher first of all, because suppose we shout the slogan of free thinking and start doing research on a particular topic without thinking about feasibility, after a while, what will happen? Will free thinking allow you to overcome the obstacles of time, resource, then your ability or the lack of it, and also funding, the monetary aspect? You cannot do without that. So free thinking does not mean haphazard thinking. You have to weigh the pros and cons because research is a serious endeavor and it has got a strong bearing on your subsequent career. Okay, any other question, please?
Hello, sir.
Yes.
This is Supriya Mondol. Sir, I want to ask you, in my community, actually I want to research on my community, and there is no written book. We have just and different language, and also we have no inscription also. If I want to select my research topic on my community and culture, what methodology should I choose to explore my culture besides interview method and survey method?
Oral narratives will be your primary text in most cases. So obviously, interviews oral methodology, these things will be of great importance to you, so far as methods are concerned. Now, methodology can be, it can be Marxist, it can be subaltern. At all cases, it will be based on cultural studies, from the perspective of cultural studies.
Thank you.
You will have to understand that, as Professor Anisur Rahman was talking about, sometimes you may use more than one methodology, but they should gel well together, seamless. Okay, any other question?
Thank you, sir.
Hello, sir.
Yes.
Yeah, sir, I would like to ask you a question on the issue of relevance that you have addressed in course of your lecture, that as per the NEP 2020 or as per the interdisciplinary approach of the present day, that we have to choose our research topic so that it can address the social, political, and the other issues. So my question is, how would you like to relate this particular issue with the fact that if a researcher wants to work on the classics or the texts that belong to a remotely historical period, so how can these two can be dealt with simultaneously?
No, first thing you have to understand is, I am not saying, nobody is telling you to abandon your research interest.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Number one.
Yes, sir.
What we are actually telling you to do is to keep your mind open to the tools and insights that you may glean from other fields of study. Number one.
Yes.
Number two, even classics can be revisited.
Yes. Yes.
If you bring into the ambit of your research, say, adaptation of those classics, then obviously contemporary relevance and reworking of those classics can be addressed, and in the process, the social dynamics of change can also be talked about. For example, there are countless adaptations of the Mahabharata story or the Ramayana story, either as whole or in part.
Yes, sir.
So obviously, you can still work on the classics, but bring in their contemporary adaptations maybe.
Okay, sir. Thank you, sir.
Because literature has a very peculiar, resilient character of renewing itself over time.
Yes.
Are you getting my point?
Yes, sir.
And that
Yes,
is why that renewal has to be taken into consideration. That is what I am trying.
yes, sir. Yes, sir. I understood, sir. Thank you, sir.
Go on. Any other question, please?
Yes, sir. This is Mirajul Islam. Sir, my question is, while I'm seeking for a research area, and when I determine that this is my research area and I want to do my research on that particular area, but while facing interviews and in various universities, and that particular proposal or that particular research area being rejected or I faced so many challenges on that particular area. So should I have an alternative research area, or should I have changed my area, sir, research area? Sir,
No,
please take.
one thing is there, Nirajul. The problem is we teachers are often vilified by you, people like you, and I have, when I was a student, I have also vilified my kind of teachers.
Yes, sir.
Wait, let me finish. When you are talking about rejection, you have to understand the problem is often the researchers do not understand one very simple thing, that the ability is something that is not a monopoly of the researcher. The ability, inability, consideration is something that applies equally to the supervisor. For example, if you tell me to supervise a research on digital humanities, I will tell you, good luck, try elsewhere. Because I am not conversant with or competent in digital humanities. So sometimes it so happens that people like you, I am not trying to criticize you. Please try to understand this. Students often say that I have got rejected. People rejected me, people did not pay heed to what I was trying to say. Sometimes it also happens like this, that they are not qualified to supervise a research on a particular area. For example, I am telling you one thing from my own personal experience. I have done my research on Kamala Das, and I was in 2004 and 5. The topic that I actually chose was quite new, because I was talking about the poetics of resistance and the study of marginal voices in Kamala Das's poetry. I did not get anyone to be interested in my particular topic in the university that I wanted to work in under. So I was fortunate enough that a professor from a constituent college had the expertise and the experience to be my guide. So sometimes this is also very significant, and I think you should also give proper importance to this aspect. This is number one. Having said that, I am being very clear. Suppose you are being rejected. Your proposal is not being given the nod. You should not necessarily or automatically fault the interview board. The fault may lie with them, it is true, but the fault may lie in your own proposal as well. So I think if you are rejected, you cannot do anything with about it. The only thing you are left with, when Niladri R. Chatterjee was talking about how to face an interview, I was butting in sometimes because I thought certain points had to be made. Obviously, I didn't want to undermine his authority. I was trying to underpin his authority and his effort. And that is what I was trying to point out. That if you are rejected, you cannot just think let down. You have to think that there may be something that you may improve. That is the only thing that we can do. That is the only thing that we can do. I was appearing myself, I was appearing for a job interview for a particular university. I am not taking any name. Do you know, I was answering all the questions reasonably well. Then one gentleman asked me a question, have you taught kids? I said yes. Have you taught Ode to a Nightingale? I said yes. Can you explain the phrase embalm darkness? I said yes, and I explained it. And then that gentleman asked me, one very famous Bengali poet has translated Keats's Ode to a Nightingale. Have you read it? I said no. Then he said, just think, he said, how has that gentleman, that poet, translator, translated this particular phrase? I said, sir, I don't know, or madam, I don't know. It may mean Shurobhito Adhar, Andhokar. He said, no, you are a Bengali, you should read it. Then I actually understood that I am not going to get this job. So I was young, I was hot-headed, just like you are now. I asked him, how is it relevant to my teaching us to a batch of students in English? I may be a non-Bengali, I may not know Bengali. Does it mean that I may not be able to teach them? So if I had taken it to heart and if I said, oh, I will not appear at any other interview, would I have been in a position to address you now? I don't think. So you have to be resilient, and that is what, when Shoikat was actually pointing out his heart, quite legitimate, I quipped that you have to be resilient. And you have to go on improving yourself. So just think and just be aware in case you have any faults, you have any shortcomings. Next question.
Thank you, sir. Thank you.
It's all right. Yes. Come on. Any question is welcome.
Sir, this is Mary here.
Yes.
Sir, my question is that, like you have just mentioned in your lecture, that now any like national education policy wants that research should be concentrated. What is some kind of contribution in our Indian politics or sociology and all these things? But the researcher who has already chosen their topic beforehand, and sometimes like my topic is like representation of women and marginality in the paintings and life of Diego Rivera, one Mexican Marxist painter and muralist. Yes, sir. So, sir, now, like suddenly, sometimes though I haven't faced any interview, till date, like except my MPhil interview Viva, but sir, sometimes we have question like we have faced some questions like, what is the contribution of your research in kind of like how your research will help like in Indian society or kind of politics or social, like I might not like not getting the point, like what is our contribution towards the research, like what will help our this kind of research? Can you just help me to get in the point, like we are doing research and but sometimes in my case I'm little bit clueless, like okay, how it really help, like the contribution in the terms of scientific research, our literary research will help in that case.
Have you finished? Now,
Yes, sir.
you are just like my own student, so that's why I'm telling you.
Yes, sir.
First, drop the likes. This is a very bad mannerism that will be very detrimental to your chances in a particular interview. drop the likes. Are you getting my point? Please don't say like, and like. While framing your question or while saying something, please don't use these discourse markers, because they actually take away from the weight and relevance of your question. Are you
Okay,
getting my
sir.
point?
Yes, sir.
Okay, number one. Number two, you have to be innovative and you have to be practical. You see, you have already started, and this is something I had pointed out. I think you were not paying much heed to what I was telling. First thing I told you during my lecture was that if you have already chosen your topic, you just don't give up. You complete it, you finish it. You get it over, and then you start branching out to greener pastures. This much is clear? So
Yes, sir.
you complete your research project about that painting. Chase paintings, yes? Okay.
Yes.
Similarly, you should be innovative and bold. You have got nothing to lose. You have to understand this. So why don't you say that Mexico of Chase time was underdeveloped? It was similarly poverty stricken. The social inequities were widespread. Women and children were being marginalized, they were being trampled upon by the powers that be.
Yes.
And unfortunately, a similar situation still remains, still prevails in much of my country. So my research can provide parallels to an understanding of similar treatment by Indian painters, and thereby create a space in cultural studies. Are you getting my point?
Yes, sir.
So don't you think it is reasonably convincing?
Yes, sir.
And what you can do then? What you can do then, while writing your thesis, you can take up similar painter or similar painters from India who have also dealt with the similar subject, and thereby create a kind of a comparative framework. Are you getting my point?
Sir, yes, sir. I have already done this in my MPhil dissertation. That narratives of Diego Rivera and Bengal School of Art from the perception of decoloniality.
Then what's the harm? What's the harm? The problem is, come on. One thing you have to understand. If somebody asks you the question, what will your contribution be? What will your contribution be?
Yes, yes, sir.
Then obviously he or she, they want a straight, logical answer from you. You have to be intelligent. You have to be resourceful. Are you getting my point?
Yes, sir.
Interview is not only about your bookish learning. It is also your ability to make connections.
Yes.
and to point out those connections when you are asked to do that. I
Okay.
hope you have understood.
Yes, sir.
Okay. Next.
Thank you, sir.
Yes, come in. Any other question? Come on. Oh, another thing I am telling you, this is important. Some of you have pointed out that you had certain other questions that you could not or did not ask in previous sessions. Now, if you have any unasked question from any previous discussion, you may also ask, because this is going to be your last chance during this particular workshop. Okay,
Sir,
Vivek is the, yes,
sir, Pulok Sarkar is asking a
a
question.
question. Yes, yes, read out.
Sir, suppose I have chosen my area from children's literature. Now
Yes,
it is necessary to find out the methodology in the course of my reading. If so, how can I recognize this?
okay. Children's literature. The methodology, the problem is, it depends on which text, which author, which aspect you choose. Based on that only can anyone suggest adoption of a particular methodology or the rejection of some others. You have to understand this. If there are illustrations, you can talk about visual methodology. If there are class issues, then obviously Marxism may come in handy. And there is something called, there is something called age studies. There is something called juvenile studies and geriatric studies. So pediatric and geriatric studies are also there. So you have to understand what you are going to research on. Based on that only, after you have thought about that, can you ultimately choose a particular method. Not before that. Yes. I think there are no other questions. Yes.
Yes, sir, no other question in the chat box.
Okay, in that case, all it remains for me is to sum up the session. I'm thankful to the participants for bearing with us. Thankful for listening to you, for listening in, being bored and becoming a scholar. I'm reminded of a famous song, Amigos para Siempre, sung by Sarah Brightman and Jose Carreras during the closing ceremony of Barcelona Olympics in 1992. We had actually started this workshop and many of you were strangers and I was a stranger to you as well. But we have been together, learned and loved together, and that's why if we translate the words of that famous song that Sarah Brightman was singing with tears in her eyes, we'll be friends for life. I hope this experience has enriched you ever so slightly. You know, the 6 other speakers that I had managed to rope in, damning myself, they have really unimpeachable credentials. And I hope their deliberations have helped you in understanding the research process. So you are required to furnish your content absorption report by tomorrow, just as you are required to submit an unpublished original paper in about 2,000 words in order to be considered for certification. I hope the group that has been created, the bond that has been cemented in the last 7 days or a little bit more, because of my unfortunate problem with my voice, it will endure. We'll keep in touch, and together we shall overcome. Thank you.